So, what happens when you try to land a plane in the middle of a typhoon? Well, we're about to find out. This is us leaving airport in Beijing, and this is the typhoon I'm talking about. So, we made it in one piece, but the plane apparently skid off the road, and so you see all of these fire trucks. They are all attending to us because essentially they had to stop the plane in the middle of the tarmac. And here you can see a little patch of grass that is underneath the plane. It looked like the plane actually skid off the runway as it landed, and a ton of this debris got on the bottom of the plane. Here's a better image of the fire trucks, and this is our entry into Hong Kong. So it was quite an interesting start to our trip here, but we landed from Beijing, and so this was kind of the way that this trip started. It was on our way to Hong Kong, and it was in the middle of a typhoon that we landed, but thank God we made it in one piece. Our flight was actually delayed by 12 hours because of this typhoon, and they still kind of pushed it. We even made the news, and so this is actually an image of the television clips that were actually being reported as we were in Hong Kong, and so we actually made the news, guys. It was kind of an interesting beginning to our trip, but we're troopers and we trekked on, and here you could actually see what they were saying is that the plane actually skid off the runway and into the grass, and so it was definitely an interesting start. But here's the airport. Here's us actually walking through the airport. Our luggage had to be carried over to our hotel later on in the day, but we made it, and this is our first impressions of Hong Kong. We kind of strolled through its streets, and you could see that the markets were out and about the day right after this typhoon occurred. So life doesn't stop for any typhoon is kind of the moral of the story. So this is actually our first stop here, which is the Avenue of the Stars, and this is from the Kowloon side of Hong Kong, and you can see gorgeous city views here along Victoria Bay, and it's even more magnificent at night, and you'll see that later in the video, but you can see how beautiful this is. You can still see the clouds that lingered from this typhoon, and this is where you will get kind of that same Hollywood Walk kind of feel here. All of the stars that are famous in Hong Kong are kind of inscribed in this railway along this little coastline, and that iconic statue of Bruce Lee is actually on this little stretch of land. But you could still see all of these clouds that kind of lingered, but it was still quite a beautiful day for the most part. There wasn't a lot of sun, which was great, and so it was quite a bit of humidity, but at least we weren't getting scorched by the sun. And along this stretch of railing, you can see that there are images or handprints of these actors. That was Chow Yun-fat, another famous actor. And you can see these junkyard ships that kind of line Victoria Bay. This is that iconic statue of Bruce Lee, and he's the most famous actor of all actors in Hong Kong. And unfortunately, the story of Bruce Lee is quite tragic, but he was quite the icon. Here's my son kind of posing for a photo, and I think this was kind of a very common thing, because after my son did this, a few other people that admired Bruce Lee were doing the same. And he was named Star of the Century, which was interesting. But my impressions of Hong Kong: pretty beautiful city. You're going to see that we do access the railway here, and so the railway system here is also pretty nice. I will say it is slightly more confusing than the one we actually were in just recently in Beijing. I felt that they were kind of all over the place in terms of the directions of the trains that were going. But this was the railway station here, and pretty affordable. They do only accept cash for single trips, and so you will need some cash. You can't purchase these trips along this railway system with a credit card if you're using the single way system, and so that's a little bit of a nuisance. But we decided that we would make the most of the day, and so we made a trek up to one of these attractions in the area. It's called Tian Tan, and this is basically a very large Buddhist temple. And along this area, it's on Lantau Island, which is a little bit of a trip from Hong Kong proper. But this Buddha is amazing. This is a monastery at the top of a mountain, and you can see that the Buddha is actually on top of the mountain. It's actually a very, very large statue, and this is kind of the little area around it. Now, this is generally a free attraction, but it is encouraged that you do give a small donation to the Buddhist monks that maintain it. And like I mentioned, this is a monastery, so it's always important that you're respectful of the space, as it is still a religious site. If you haven't already, please like the video. It does help with promoting it, and so it really is something that I would certainly appreciate. But all of these statues along this little stretch of walkway represented all of the signs of the Chinese zodiac, and it's a pretty wide open space. That center area is similar to the circular mound that we were just at the last site at the Temple of Heaven. In that circular mound, basically the person standing in the middle of the mound was able to kind of have their prayers magnified up to heaven. And these are just some images of how cool this Buddha looks with all of the lingering clouds that were still there from that typhoon. You can see the walkway up there is quite a bit of a stretch. I didn't count how many steps, but it was a very manageable set of stairs. And we kind of just made our way up there just to see what was there. But you get all of these dramatic images of this Buddha just sitting there in the forest with all of these lingering clouds in the fog. So it was a pretty impressive day. We trekked up there, and really we kind of just spent the day looking and marveling at the statue. So a little bit about Hong Kong. Hong Kong is an interesting region. It's a part of China, but it is also something that was colonized by the UK. And so it has a special status in terms of China. It has two systems, essentially. It's under administrative rule by China, but it has its own dollar and it has its own currency, and its economic system is quite different from that of China. So it is functionally more like the US, but it is a part of China. So it has a very interesting history, and it does show in terms of some of the city itself. It's quite different from the rest of China. It's definitely different from Beijing. So it's really got a unique history. Hong Kong is trying to be Asia's global city, and so a lot of different tourists visit Hong Kong for its special status, and you don't need a visa to travel to Hong Kong. So if you want to get a taste of Asia, this is a good place to start. I would argue that Singapore is also Asia's global city, but Hong Kong is quite special. You can see how beautiful it is in terms of the nature at this Lantau Island, and you get these great views of this area. It is an island, and so you'll see lots and lots of water views all around. And it's a monastery at this location. If you enter that statue, that's actually a building, and inside that building is the monastery. We weren't allowed to take any photographs or images inside the building, but it's quite an amazing feat to have a statue that large that was kind of built for the purposes of this Buddhist temple. And again, you can see how beautiful this statue is just sitting there. What I loved about Hong Kong was that they had all of these amazing little malls at every single railway stop that we were at. This is an example of one of those malls. It's just a magnificent mall. It's very large, lots of different stores and restaurants, and that is one thing that Hong Kong got right is the food. The food here is amazing. It is global, a lot of different options. And we were spending some time here in Hong Kong. We decided to take the ferry back, but they were actually filming a movie or some sort of commercial at this spot. So we were able to kind of see how that went. But we spent the evening just kind of enjoying each other's company. And later that evening, we took the ferry back to our hotel. And so you can see here how pretty this view is with all of the lights in Hong Kong. This ferry took us across Victoria Harbour back to Kowloon Station, and it's a beautiful view of the Victoria Bay with all of the skyline. It was a really cheap ferry ride. It was only about $2 per person, so it wasn't gonna break the bank. It was only a 10-minute ride, but you get to appreciate all of these views. There is another place you can get some amazing views, and that's at Victoria's Peak. It's a little bit of a mountain at the base of Hong Kong where you can see all of this, but we decided to take the ferry as it was a little bit more convenient for us, and we still appreciated and admired all of this. So Hong Kong, in my opinion, is a very modern city, a very global city in terms of its food and culture. And it's a city caught between two different states. It's caught between the China aspect of it and the Western aspect of it in terms of its UK influence. But that said, it was definitely worth a stop. I would certainly encourage you to fly here, but not in a typhoon. In any case, this is how our cost broke down. We spent $167 on hotel costs. This was for 2 nights. And we spent about $278 on airfare along with airline luggage fees. We spent $180 on food because the food was great. And the miscellaneous tours that we did were actually free, so that cost us nothing, leaving a grand total of $626 with a per day average cost of about $313, which is really relatively affordable. So that said, our next stop here is going to be Hanoi. We're going to Vietnam, and we actually explore 2 parts of Vietnam. We explore Hanoi as well as Ha Long Bay. So I'll see you there. Like and subscribe. Thanks.